Last week, we dove into the love of God. If you were here, we looked at the end of chapter 3 in Ephesians, and we looked at the love of God and the life of the church. And honestly, I can think of no better way to pause and experience that together than with communion. Than with this intentional time to prepare our hearts, to remind ourselves of the sweet truth of the life-changing power of the gospel. That's why we gather, because Jesus changes lives as he puts us in family and he calls us to go make a difference. And so he also called us to remember, to pause, to take time. And so that's what we're doing today, because it's an opportunity to reflect, to celebrate, and to let God speak to our soul. And so if you're new with us, we've been walking through the book of Ephesians in the New Testament. The author's name is Paul, and he's been taking us on a very specific journey. He's reminding his audience and us what it looks like to follow Jesus compared to everything else in their culture. Because the Ephesians had similar questions, similar concerns, similar spiritual soup of their day. And so Paul has been taking us on this journey to really know our God. And starting in chapter 4, he's going to challenge us to live that out. If this is true in your life, then because of that, here's how we live. And so we pick up chapter 4 with these words: therefore, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead, what's the text say? There's a life that we can live or not live that's worthy of what Jesus has done to change our life. A life that's worthy of our calling. And the question is, why? And he says it right there. For you've been called by who? God. And so if God's done a work in your life, then follow that. Live that out. Become who God has called us to be. Again, we just sang that song. But here's the simple reality. Those words, live a life worthy of your calling, those words do not mean much if God hasn't changed our lives. Right? Why would we want to live for someone I don't know? How could I trust his answers and what he has for me? Why would I go where Jesus is leading if I really don't have that personal and powerful relationship with him? And so Paul is saying from behind bars, I don't want you to miss what God has for you. He's pleading, pushing us to discover more. And I want you to understand, our world puts a calling on your life too, doesn't it? See, we have a choice about what God wants to do or what the world wants to do. There is a calling placed on our lives. There's a pressure and a pull to be, to act, and to do. And maybe that calling, because I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I've totally fallen for this trap. Maybe that call in your life is to be busy. Make money. Look good. Have stuff. There's times we even get our very identity, value, and understanding from those things. But is that who you want to be? Whatever calling, whatever pace, whatever pressure, whatever's drawing you and directing you in your life, is that who you want to be? What you're made for? And will that ultimately satisfy? Will that rat race pace? Will that mythic image? Will all that stuff really, truly satisfy and worth chasing after? And so here is my simple challenge for today. What are you and I holding on to tightly? And what are we willing to hold loosely? What are you holding on to tightly? Because I guarantee there are things you are holding on to tightly. And what are we willing to just let go? What are we going to hold on to loosely? In other words, what is worth your life invested, your passion, your prayer, your time, your energy, and focus? What is worth your life in that area? That's our calling. And are there some things that maybe you and I are holding on to that would be good for us to loosen the grip of and let go of? See, there's no doubt Paul had a Paul plan for his life. right? If you know his life, if you know his story, the author of this book, Paul had a Paul plan for his life. That's why he achieved so much. But because his relationship with Jesus, his Lord, he now is saying, what if I walked where God is leading and not Paul leading? You see the difference? And because of that relationship with God, because of how God has marked us and called us to live out the overflow of him in our lives, verse 2, we actually live our lives, always be humble and gentle. And I'm like, I don't even know how to react to that, because there are times I'm not humble and there are times I'm not gentle. And anyone else? Like, can I just be practical? We went and got Pizza Hut Friday night, and we were supposed to pick it up at 6:15. Pizza Gut, if you'd prefer. 6:15. I get there at 6:20, and they're like, oh, sorry, it's not ready. And I have this phrase, probably not the most gentlest of phrases. I go, well, just tell me the real time. Because you know how they kind of placate, like, oh, be ready in 3 minutes, sir. And it's like 15 minutes later. Like, just tell me the real time. She's like, 7 to 10 minutes. And so I'm like, okay, no big deal. I sit down, scroll through our normal brain-numbing scroll. And about 10 minutes later, the next Pizza Hut guy comes up to me, and he goes, hey, what was your order? Told him my name. Oh, that'll be about another 10 minutes. So this time, my non-gentle, non-patient, non-humble piece walks up and goes, hey, real quick. I just want you to tell me the truth. She told me 7 to 10 minutes. It's already been 10 minutes, and you just told me 10 minutes. He's like, and then the pizza was ready. So let's just be honest that we don't have this all figured out. But because of God in our lives, we are to live distinctly, uniquely, a mark of who he is, to try and be, to live in such a way that we are humble and gentle and patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Can we read this out loud together, the whole verse? Ready? Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Now, who's got that down perfectly? Because we know that heartbeat, that reflection, that attitude is under attack in our world. And I absolutely believe it's intentional. The enemy wins. The enemy first modeled this, the opposite of this. The enemy wins when we're at each other's throats in churches, cities, and countries. And so understand, this is not simply about behavior. I hope you get this morning. This isn't simply, hey, behave. This isn't about behavior, guys. This is about reflection. That you and I are living the fullness of love of Christ that we saw last week, that we are showing one another Jesus, and the world can see Jesus in deep community and incredible togetherness. See, humble and gentle refers to how we think about ourselves in relationship to one another. And when I was a teenager, started young, I could bench over 300 pounds. I was varsity in wrestling my sophomore year, and I had a martial arts background. And I would actually walk around this large mall in Spokane, Washington, thinking to myself, I could beat you up, I could beat you up, I could beat you up. Yeah, I was stupid. But it's easy to do this. It's easy to have this attitude about us, to put ourselves first in some category, and then others lower than us. Maybe it's our stuff. I drive, I have, you don't, you're not. Maybe it's our smarts, our sacrifice, our looks. I mean, you name it. We get this human pecking order that we seem to try and live by, and then get unhappy when people don't perform or behave like we want. This one might be a little harder to raise your hand, but you ever been there? Mm-hmm. And so Jesus is saying, my people are different. And we've got to wrestle with that. Because we're to image Jesus. Image Jesus in humility, kindness, long-suffering, and forgiveness. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, but there is so much difficulty in relationships. And we're even going to talk about it again in 2 weeks. But for today, I simply want to say, be Jesus. Be Jesus. Love like Jesus. Show off Jesus to one another because you and I need Jesus from one another. Right? I need Jesus from you guys. God, where do you show up? If you ask him, if you look at the Bible, God, where do you show up? It's when we show one another love like we have been loved by him. Because we all step in stupid. We all make a mess. And this family is so important to God. We choose patience, grace, and love. We seek to hold on to where God is taking us, this life worthy of his calling, invested in the messy. Because I don't want you to miss the expectation of this verse, the calling of this verse. It is that you and I are so deeply connected that you actually have times you need to be patient and are affected by others' faults, right? Like Paul wouldn't say, be patient, be kind, be humble, be gentle, put up with one another's faults if he didn't know how we really do life, really do this Jesus walk is going to get rub up against one another. The expectation is you're going to have to be patient, gentle, and affected by others' faults. This togetherness that God calls us to takes God's supernatural power to thrive, my friends, instead of just being moral, polite, nice, or fine. See, I need the wisdom of those of you who are older. I need that wisdom. I need that experience. I need that coming alongside and guiding. I need the passion of those who are younger. I need you to help shape who God wants me to be, to rub off some of these rough edges and to be an example. The experience of those just a few steps ahead, I need. And the questions of those pushing us forward, we need, because the calling is to make every effort to keep yourselves, what's the text say? United in spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Because the real life change of the gospel. We seek to hold on to where God has taken us over how people might annoy us. And I guarantee you, in today's culture, that's not worth it. But in Jesus' definition of relationships, it is. Don't miss that unity comes from intimacy with the Spirit. Don't miss that. Walk by the flesh, live out the calling of our cravings, and there goes peace, purpose, and love. But when we submit to the Spirit, empowered by the Spirit, walking together, God shows up, and it's crazy fun. See, our culture doesn't do unity very well. We do tribe. We do preference. We do us versus them. But Jesus broke his body and poured out his blood to make us one. We're going to celebrate that in a few moments. It's like this. Probably many of you took time to look in a mirror today, right? You're like, ooh, looking good, right? Right? I mean, like, looking good. Here, let's see who I can beam with the light. Looking good, right? But here's the deal. What happens in the relationships with one another, right? Imagine that you're trying to do relationships with another. There's this sense of flex and stress and fracture and shatter, right? And so when we're doing relationships the way God calls us to, that broke a little more than I wanted it to. I know, we had eight months of greatness, and now we're going to have 7 years of bad luck, right? Here's the point. Our ability to image Jesus is hard in our own flawed brokenness, right? Your ability to image Jesus is flawed because you and I, we got cracks. It's hard to love others in their brokenness. We're not two perfect mirrors perfectly reflecting Jesus. We are marred, we are cracked, we are stressed, and we are fractured. These cracks, these shards can be all we see. And they can even cut us. It can be hard to image Jesus, to love a world stained by sin, hurting and looking for hope. Because we are all flawed, cracked, broken at some capacity, trying to love imperfectly like Jesus has perfectly loved us. I mean, look at the pattern. It's cracked, it's broken, it's stressed. We can even look to the mirror of our own ideals, our desires, our preferences, and if we're not careful, we will continue to shatter relationships to get what we want. Or we can look to Jesus to first heal, to fill in our cracks, and then by his love and grace, see people like he does. Because when we look at each other, we're going to see the cracks. We're going to see the shards. We're going to see how we will poke one another. But in Jesus, we're looking to image him to one another. Clean up on aisle 5. Verse 4 continues, because there is one body and one Spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. I mean, like, that's a lot of ones, isn't it? Do you think God has a point? Because unity shows off the reality of God. As we image Jesus, as we unify in different backgrounds, perspectives, races, this unity shows off God. So when we speak about one another, when we seek as a church our worship, our hope, be one, bear together as one, because as a church, we will either unify under his mission or divide over the differences. That's the state of American churches right now. They are either unifying and healthy under the mission that King Jesus, the head of the church, has given, or they are dividing over the differences. And so CBC, we are here to passionately glorify God and helping people find and follow Jesus together in real life. We are a God-focused family, leaning into and loving one another with truth. We'll talk about that next week, with a challenge to take our next steps together wherever God is taking us. And so again, what are we holding on to tightly? And what are we holding on to loosely? There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and in all and living through all. See, our culture is desperately and deeply seeking meaning in all the marred and broken promises that it finds itself. We're searching for substance, guys. And you have an answer. Not just us, but you have an answer ignited by your life, gathered in unity to show off the God we serve who saves and loves. That Jesus would inflame our opportunity and take our heritage, reach our neighborhoods for his glory and our good. We are going to continue worshiping by taking communion together in a few moments. But simply a big part of communion is taking time to remember how well we are walking out this calling. The calling we talked about at the beginning. Who is God? Who's he made for us? To image him with our lives. To call our attention to Jesus and what he has done. We examine our hearts to see how close we are. And are there any issues to confess? And hear me, another part of communion is unity. Another part of communion is unity. The need and the opportunity to search our hearts and maybe have to make amends. Because Jesus actually says this in Matthew 5. So if you are offering your gift on the altar, if you are here to worship, ready to praise, ready to set your life before him in the calling he has, And there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you. Leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled with your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. See, my friends, you may need to get out of your seat before communion. You may need to say, I'm sorry, or send a text. Today is to grab a hold of all Jesus has for us and to do some letting go of.